If your primary use case is movies and TV shows, then the A95L from Sony is probably the best TV that you can buy. But if you're a gamer, can you say the same thing? Is the Sony A95L the best gaming TV that you can buy? Well, hopefully by the end of the video, you will have that answered for you. And the answer will definitely be different if you're somebody who games a lot versus somebody who only games casually on the side sometimes. I'll be looking at both scenarios in this video. I'll also be looking at both HDR and SDR gaming. And within the SDR category, I'll include low resolution gaming like the Nintendo Switch. All right, so let's start with how you actually get into game mode. That's a little bit different with the A95L. There's this new content type selection. So when you switch from video to game, now you are in game mode. And after that, you'll notice that there are 3 preset game mode selections for the actual picture presets. And you got standard game, RTS game, and FPS game. Now, these are all presets that are predetermined by Sony themselves, and they're set accordingly, but you don't have to use them that way. You can tinker with the settings and save whatever selection you want for those presets. For example, I took a game like Starfield where I don't think it necessarily has the best HDR presentation, so I took some settings, changed them up, and now I have a better presentation in Starfield, and I have a preset for it. I have to say I love when TVs have things like this in place. Not all games are created equal, and when you're looking at some games, maybe you want to change the settings up just for that specific game. Well, now you have 3 different presets to do that with. One thing that caught me off guard is when I was diving deeper into the picture settings, I noticed that Advanced Contrast Enhancer was gone from the selection menu inside of game mode. It's there outside of game mode, but for whatever reason, it's not there inside of game mode. I personally found that a little bit odd because I think Advanced Contrast Enhancer is something that a lot of people would use in game mode and have used in the past. In talking about the settings, there is something present that's been on a lot of Sony TVs in the past, and that is reality creation. So thankfully that is still in, and reality creation is something that I think a lot of people should use because it can really clean up some of those lower resolution titles. And not only lower resolution titles, it works great with 4K as well, especially when you're talking about the Xbox Series X. As you guys might know, some of these games are going to be created with lower resolution assets in order for the game to run properly on the Xbox Series X. They have to cut corners a little bit. So having something like reality creation is very nice, and reality creation to me is one of the best features in Sony TVs. When you're utilizing a feature like reality creation and you have it next to a TV that doesn't have reality creation on, the other TV can just flat out look blurry at times when you're comparing it to the Sony TV. And that's just a testament to the picture clarity that these Sony OLED TVs are delivering. The A95L is no exception there. Something you also want to know about the A95L is that they do have the game bar like the other Sony TVs this year, and you bring that up by pressing the menu button once you are in game mode. This is just going to be kind of like your typical game bar that you have seen in other TVs, so it's nice to see Sony include this. So now that we talked about the menu system, how to get into game mode, how to set it up to your liking, let's talk about the actual big thing here, and that's going to be picture quality. I want to first start with HDR, but before I do that, I just want to remind you that this is an A95L from the store shelves. I went out and got it myself for review, and I was not sent this TV by Sony. So that's right, this is not a sponsored review. But if you want to help support the channel, one of the best ways that you could do that is by buying your next TV using one of my affiliate links. These links are going to be in the description, and it costs you nothing to use them. So if you're buying a TV, please click those links before you do so. And if you're not in the market to buy a TV this week, simply just hitting the like button does help a lot too. All of these things will help contribute to getting awesome TVs in for review. So thank you guys so much for your continued support. Now let's go on to the rest of the video. Now let's talk about the star of the show, HDR gaming. And I gotta say, man, gaming on the A95L in HDR, simply put, it is the best experience I've ever had gaming on any TV in HDR thus far. And that's not an exaggeration. So why do I say that? Well, when you're looking at the A95L, there's a few things that stick out. Brightness, color, and clarity. All 3 things are going for the Sony A95L, but I really want to focus in on the brightness. It just seems to know where to direct the brightness in a way that I don't see replicated on other TVs. The HDR impact on this TV is just great. Now, the most important setting in regards to HDR impact is going to be the HDR tone mapping options. This is in the settings option, and you're going to want to set this up to your preference. With HDR on gradation preferred or brightness preferred, the brightness is really good in this TV. And when you put it to brightness preferred, you can get some really spectacular moments, no doubt about it. I think most people should start with gradation preferred, as it does kind of give you that more balanced approach between the two modes, but it's something you probably want to try out yourself and see if you think there is any differences. You know, there are certain scenes where there's not any difference at all, but there are a lot of scenes where brightness preferred is going to be the method that delivers the highest impact, so to speak. So I suggest just playing around with both. You can also set the HDR tone mapping to off, and then you could set up your HDR in your console to the clipping point of 1200 nits, but this is something that I didn't really like personally. I thought it just lacked the HDR impact that the other modes gave me, whether that be gradation preferred or brightness preferred. But I will say this, gradation preferred and brightness preferred does tend to clip highlights sometimes. So if you're somebody who really wants to preserve the highlights and see all the highlight detail possible, well, then you're going to want to use HDR tone mapping off. But I do want to warn you that it is a dramatic difference from having gradation preferred on or brightness preferred on. I don't think there's really a wrong answer here. It just boils down to what your personal preference is. So that's HDR game mode, and I struggle to say really any negative things about it. But when it comes down to this next thing, well, that's where it changes a little bit. Enter the discussion of SDR gaming. Now, SDR gaming, I said I'm going to look at it in two different windows. Let's look at it in the window of the Nintendo Switch. So spoiler alert, the low resolution titles actually look really great when they are upscaled on the A95L. And this is not really a surprise. This has been the case with most Sony TVs in the last couple of years, thanks to the way that they do upscaling with the Nintendo Switch and other low resolution sources. So I definitely have no complaints on the low resolution front, especially since you can also use reality creation with that to take it even further. Where I was a little bit let down with the A95L regarding game mode was going to be in the SDR game mode category for brightness. So if you are somebody that cares about SDR brightness in game mode, then I think you're going to be a little underwhelmed, as it doesn't seem like it's as bright in the SDR game mode as it is outside of game mode for SDR. Now, I'm not sure if these are going to be for protection reasons. Maybe they don't want to crank their SDR game mode up. I have seen other manufacturers do that as well, but at least they don't lock peak brightness, and you can actually have this at the highest peak brightness on the settings menu. But I have to say it still is just a little bit dimmer than outside of game mode. But it is something where I would say they're probably second within the manufacturers on SDR brightness regarding OLED TVs. So those of you that do like SDR brightness, well, you'll be happy to know that there is a way to change this within the video signal options. You can actually change the SDR signal to an HDR signal. Now, if you do this, it will manipulate the picture and in some cases make the picture look a lot worse. Albeit brighter, it is something that you just have to be cautious with when you are using this setting. I don't suggest using the HDR10 option, as that's going to completely wreck the image. If you do use this option, try HLG, because that wrecks the image a lot less than the other one. I personally didn't mind playing on HLG, and I could see myself using it for certain titles. The SDR brightness thing didn't bother me as much as it does with some other manufacturers, because it's not as egregious. There's not something where the peak brightness is locked out. So I can get away with a lot of this. And it's okay because the picture quality is fantastic in SDR. So as long as I don't have another TV next to it, I probably don't even notice this. I probably don't even point it out. But since I do have the luxury of having another TV next to it that is a lot brighter in SDR game mode, then I can call it out and just let you know that there is a difference. And if I'm not calling them out, I'm doing you a disservice if you're buying a TV. You need to know these things. Now, outside of picture quality, there is something we really have to address here, and that's going to be the inputs. There is a lack of HDMI 2.1 inputs on this TV. There's only two available for you. One of them is shared with the EARC port. So this could be a problem if you have a soundbar that doesn't have additional HDMI 2.1 ports, and you have multiple gaming consoles that need HDMI 2.1. How likely is this though? Not very likely for most households. I would say that you will be fine with the A95L in that regard, but you just have to keep this in mind. If you do fall into that category, you're going to need external inputs. Now, I can't talk about the A95L without talking about, yes, it does cost a lot of money. So is it worth that money? I can't answer that question for you. That's going to have to be up to you to decide. If you're buying a TV primarily for gaming, yes, there are cheaper options out there. But if you're using this TV for things other than gaming as well, I really do think you can make a strong argument for the A95L. It has great sound, great picture quality. I have barely any complaints except for the SDR game mode brightness. And that even has a little bit of a workaround. So yeah, maybe you still dock it for SDR gaming because of the brightness. But like I mentioned, the HDR gaming is absolutely incredible, and I have no bad things to say about that portion of it. So you just have to decide, is it going to be worth that extra money? What's the other TVs you're looking at? Factor in, are you going to be relying on TV sound? If you are relying on TV sound, you might want to pay that extra money for the A95L because the sound quality is incredible compared to the other flagship TVs out there. It's not even close. And when you bring up the other flagship TVs out there, they have flaws themselves. One of them has a really bad looking game mode in comparison to outside of game mode, and the other one is going to have some signal dropouts. So you just have to factor those things in regards to premium flagship TVs. If that's the price bracket you're in, the A95L makes a lot of sense. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments below, whether you agree or disagree with me. Now, I'll be doing a ton of A95L content, including a full review and other side-by-side comparisons. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I will also have some of those videos right here above. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.